I am not a fan of Jim Pillen, and I will say that very plainly. I think that he jumped into this decision without even understanding what it was really about because he was trying to get in bed with Trump and his whole office, and he wanted to be on the winning side, and he chose. I have never not taken Trump seriously with what he said because no matter all the craziness that comes out of his mouth, he's a demon. When he says the most awful crap that you've ever heard, believe him, because that's truly how he feels. So welcome back to Kim's Breaking Point. I'm Kim, your host. And today we're joined by Jazari from the Jazari Kual Show. And you guys already know that when we talk, we go deep and straight to the point. Today we're tracking immigration, but not just the service headlines. We're going to dig deep into what's happening in Nebraska right now, very specifically with Jim Pillen and the Cornhusker Clink. We're also going to be talking about the ICE raids and the protests happening in Chicago, Portland, and LA, and shifts in how enforcement's handling all of this. And then we have one more bigger piece behind all of this as well with the U.S. foreign policy, capitalism, and how global systems drive migration. With all the rights, the economy, and where we might be headed next. So please make sure that you're following both me and Jazari, and you'll find all the links down in the description below. And we'll just jump right into it. So firstly, let's start close to home. Governor Jim Pillen just announced that the McCook facility that he wants to turn into the ICE facility detention center, or the Cornhusker Clink, is expected to be operational by November 1st. And this is actually huge news, and I don't think a positive way, but something that's going to be happening now within a month time.
Yeah.
This facility is going to be up and running. What do you think about all that?
So I call them concentration camps.
Yes. No, I agree. I 100% agree.
I have, and people have told me like, that's not what it is and this and that. But I mean, like by definition, it technically is. I mean, I think people are mixing up concentration camps and death camps at the same time. So concentration camps originally were not death camps. They gradually became that, or rather quickly became that. But I feel like the fact that that is happening here in Nebraska, especially with Nebraska having such a huge immigrant population within Lincoln and Omaha. I don't know if you knew this, but for a while, like Omaha had the most like South Sudanese and Sudanese people or Nebraska rather, in the entire country. And so Nebraska, a state that has historically welcomed immigrants, and, we have a lot of agriculture and production work that a lot of immigrants do go and work at because, those are not jobs that Americans like. I think the entire reason that Jim Pillen is doing this is just to curry favor and cozy up to Donald Trump and feel like this is just what they have to do. It's disgusting, quite frankly.
Yes, it is.
People are being snatched up and thrown into this. And I don't know if you knew this, but down at Alligator Alcatraz, which people call Alligator Auschwitz, there's like 1,200 people missing that were sent there.
Yes.
And so those people are unaccounted for. So I think it's just a disgusting thing that our state is just doing just to curry favor with the president. And yeah.
So Jim Pillen has actually made me pretty upset in the last couple months by statements that he has come on and said. And one of them was basically him saying that he's not a politician, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? He came on the TV and he's like, oh, I'm not even really a politician. And It's like, you may have never been a politician before, but you are the politician that was elected by the state, not me, but elected by the state. And just using that as an excuse is a bunch of crap.
Maybe it was just the way that I saw the video cut, but for like they were asking him, who's going to be at this facility?
Yes.
Will it be, children? Is there a certain age limit? Like, what is the capacity? Like just basic questions on how like the logistics of this facility was going to run. And he's just like, yeah, I just didn't ask those questions. And
because
Jim Pillen is
to him. It's not important to him.
And Jim Pillen is a doctor. So you would think that somebody with like a veterinarian degree would have the critical thinking skills and ask these questions, very basic logistical questions on a very controversial thing. And he just kind of just went with the flow. And that's why I said it's just to cozy up to the president.
Right.
But yeah.
I am not a fan of Jim Pillen, and I will say that very plainly. I think that he jumped into this decision without even understanding what it was really about because he was trying to get in bed with Trump and his whole office, and he wanted to be on the winning side, and he chose. And now when you hear him speak about it, he acts like, oh, I didn't know. Oh, that's not what I'm doing. And even now, he just had an interview on KATV not too long ago where he states that he's only going after, not him, but he's only going to allow ICE to go after criminal illegal aliens. When we have already seen over the past few months how that's not happening.
I have said, they talk about wanting to mass deport people, those rally signs like mass deportation now. And I think it's important to note that, and I've said this many times, like on my socials and show and stuff like that, like you cannot mass deport criminals in this country because there are not that many criminals to mass deport. Like you just can't do it. And so it starts off, this is a talking point, right? Like we're just going after illegals, we're going after criminals. And historically speaking, we have accidentally deported US citizens. And I'm talking about like before all of this started. So when they were talking about mass deportations and things like that, I had a friend and we were talking about this on my podcast about how historically we have accidentally deported US citizens. And immediately right off the bat, that's what started happening. You had these, what was it, like a 2, 4, and 6-year-old, kids that were swept up in a raid when their mom was deported. And one of them was a cancer patient that got sent to Mexico without their medication. I mean, these are US citizens. These are US children or American children. They're not just going to go after criminals and things like that. I mean, that's just to make it palatable for people to feel like this is going to be a good thing. No,
Right.
that's not what it is.
And we also need to make sure that we're being very clear. There have been quite a few of a majority of people that have been arrested are not criminals, right? They're just everyday people living their lives, doing basic everyday cares for themselves, and they're being swept up off the street, disappeared, and then who knows what happens, because there's no structured process to what happens after they are taken to the facilities. We're not
Right.
even able to get lists of who's in these prisons or facilities, whatever you want to call them. Like normally when we think of prisons, we think of there's very specific structures that happen, right? With intake, with knowing who's there, all those types of things. And we've seen none of this happen in a good way with the facilities that have been run, especially with Alligator Alcatraz.
I mean, it's messy. It's kind of gross. Yeah, like a lot of these people, yeah, are not criminals. And I said like at the very beginning, like what is their definition of criminal? Because if they are talking about people who cross the border, and Caroline Levitt did clarify this like earlier this year, she said if you cross the border illegally, you by definition are a criminal. So the only crime is them crossing the border, even if they were, brought over here as a kid that didn't know what was going on at the time and they just knew they were going to this new place. You know what I'm saying? Like people have brought over their kids like when they were really young when they didn't have a choice. So now those kids who grew up in America are accustomed to American culture are, for all intents and purposes, American,
Right.
are now being labeled as criminals and being sent back to a country that they've never been to, that they have never known. Yeah.
Right. And the other important piece to that is, when we're talking about people coming here or, being immigrants, this encompasses a much bigger picture, because we have people who came here legally, right? People who may not be originally born in the United States, but have lived here the majority of their lives or for some period of time. We have people being arrested who have all their documentation. Even if they're not a citizen, they still have all their proper documentation to say that they're allowed to be in this country legally, still being arrested and still being taken. And like, I feel like from what I've seen with ICE is they just come in, swoop a big group of people up, throw them in a van, and they'll worry about it later.
Also, to like echo that too, people who have papers or even people who are doing it the legal way, the right way, going to immigration court hearings to check in. And then you have ICE in the hallways, like sweeping people up even after the judge was like, okay, you're good.
Right.
You've checked in, we're up to date on everything like that. Like, we'll follow up, come back. Your next court date is in X amount of months or whatever the case is. And they're like, all right, cool. I'm good. I came in, I'm doing the right thing. I'm following the law. I came and I saw the judge. The judge said I'm good. You go out in the hallway and then boom, you get snatched up and tackled in the hallway and arrested. And you had a judge that was telling people like, hey, just like go out the side door, go out the back.
Right.
And then that judge was arrested for doing that. It's a mess. This is how this is authoritarianism. You know what I'm saying? Like,
It is exactly what it is.
This is
And
wild.
please don't feel shy about saying that, because I'm very free with that word here on this. I say fascist, I say authoritarianism, I say all the words because I truly believe that is what's happening right now within our own country, on top of all of the other pieces as well too, with our foreign and everything else that's happening outside the country. They all are coming so close together that it's not even funny. And I
Yeah.
truly believe that Trump is using what's happening in Israel, and he's getting ideas, and then he's just transforming them into his own ideas to terrorize the people who live here.
And I think a lot of people are afraid to call like things what they are just because they want to
Stay neutral?
stay neutral or things like that. But I'm an actual like journalist, right? So I studied journalism and I vividly remember a course called like ethics in media and stuff. And, it talks about the ethics of journalism and, it's impossible to stay neutral, but you can be fair. And then you also have an obligation to report like the actual truth. So when you have all of these highly educated, like Harvard, journalists that are on these mainstream media channels who know the definition and know the history, like they are very, very smart all across the board, right? From CNN to MSNBC to Fox News, like these people are highly educated. They know what this is. But because when you have like corporate media and ratings and things you have to maintain
Yes.
and, advertisers that you need to keep happy, I feel like they are afraid to speak out and say what it is. I don't think they're afraid to. I think it's just like, I'm just not going to say this because I don't want to cost my job. But then you've seen, news anchors and things like that lose their jobs because of stuff like that, like Joy Reid, right? Don Lemon. But you see them all go the independent route because they have the means, they have the money, they are all very, very independently wealthy. And they continue to speak out and, call things what they actually are. But,
Don Lemon, actually, he's been doing a whole string of pieces in Chicago right now on the protests that are happening.
okay.
And I have to tell you that I was not a big Don Lemon fan when he worked for CNN. I really didn't care for his takes too much. But now that he's independent and there's no one telling him the stories he can cover and what he can say and what he
Yeah.
can do, I actually have really been enjoying his pieces that he's been covering up in Chicago. And if you have not seen it, if you're watching this and you have not seen any of the stuff that's happening in Chicago, you need to go and look. Chicago, Portland, LA, you need to go and look because they're not putting it on the mainstream media.
Yeah.
These are all things that you're only really seeing if you watch social media in some type of way, or if you're actually looking for it, because the government doesn't want this out. They don't want us to worry about the fact that all these people are protesting. And why are they protesting? Because people's rights are being stripped away. We've seen this continuously happen since Trump has taken office at the beginning of this year, with our rights being eroded every single day. And I also wanted to point out this particular fact because I just thought about it. I was watching this documentary and it was talking about how fascism works and basically how we always say how Trump lies the most, right? Like every time you hear him get on the TV and he's speaking, he's just spewing all these lies out of his mouth. And that's actually part of propaganda and how fascism works, right? Because if you can confuse the masses enough to be all fighting about different things, then he could do whatever he wants to do behind the scenes because no one's going to know what's really truth from what's reality.
So yeah, it's that flood the zone strategy, right? It's overwhelm the masses with a whole bunch of things that are going on and confuse them with a whole bunch of things that are going on so that, people don't know where to fight and they are scrambling and they might fight a few things here, but these things are going to slip through the cracks. And I think that's the entire strategy. Overwhelm your opposition. So I think that's exactly what they're doing. And things are slipping through the cracks,
I feel like we are very overwhelmed with everything going on because it's hard to keep track when Trump gets on the news and he talks for 15, 20 minutes. We all have to sit here and sort through the amount of lies that he said to find the one little sliver of truth that may be hidden in there somewhere. And
Yeah.
that really takes a lot of work and a lot of effort for even people like us to come on and like make a coherent thought because our president doesn't speak in coherent thoughts.
Well, and the other thing too, I mean, like we're independent, right? Like I have a
Yes.
team of just a handful of people. And I mean, when it comes down to like actual mainstream media that have like huge newsrooms of people who in real time can do all of this stuff and they're not speaking out and saying like, hey, this is actually a lie. Hey, this is actually authoritarianism. This is X, Y, Z, let's look at, the echoes through history and the parallels of when this happened at this point in time in history. Nobody's really doing that on the mainstream channels. And so I feel like people do go and try to seek out independent voices online. But being damn near a one-man show, like it's really hard to keep up with that. I get people who message me a lot about like, can you cover this? Can you talk about this? And it's like, I'm just one person, and I
Right.
want to, and I feel bad that I can't cover everything, but I'm also human, And so that's why
I know
I'm
the
pretty
struggle.
like kind of, selective on the things that I cover and things that I talk about. Like right now, I'm like heavily covering the trial of South Sudan's first vice president. Being South Sudanese myself and knowing how little coverage that is actually getting, I feel like it's important to do more comprehensive reporting on that issue. But I mean, like, there's so many. I was watching the news earlier today and the whole thing with Trump and Argentina and all of this stuff. Like, it's just very hard to keep up. Then I get like, a news alert that there was like another missile strike on a Venezuelan boat that killed, some people and all of that. It's just,
And that's what I was talking about before. All of this static and noise, and I don't mean to diminish what you're saying at all, because it all is very important. But when there's so many terrible things happening at once, it puts everyone in a frenzy. And it's like we don't know
yeah,
where to focus or place most of our attention, or like something that I struggle with focusing on is like when I first got started in doing any of this, it was basically about Palestine, and that was my main focus. And then over time, I started covering topics like Congo and Sudan, because they're so relevant to what's going on. I mean, they're all connected to the United States, and just bringing awareness to those topics as well. I mean, Palestine is something that we all need to be talking about, but at the same time, there's all
yeah,
of these other places in the world who are experiencing genocide and hate and just disgusting acts by their not only their government but people running and ruining things around them.
right.
And unless we actually take the time and we stop ourselves and we say, hey, I need to learn about this particular topic so that way I can tell other people about what's happening, has been more eye-opening for me than I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, I do not know a lot about what's happening in Sudan, and one thing that really bothers me the most is because of coverage and news sources actually reporting on what's happening there, it's really hard for someone like me who doesn't have any ties to Sudan to be able to sometimes come up with the proper things to say, but I still try.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's important. And anytime we have people that are being massively genocided, we need someone to speak on it. So I really do applaud the fact that you were speaking on Sudan. And I hope that you continue to do so.
I appreciate that. I will. I will.
I
I
know
mean,
topics can be hard, especially with when you're doing journalism. Like you have to focus on some of those harder pieces because with no ties to somewhere, right? It's even harder for someone like me to come up with a story and focus on it heavily. Like I had a story a couple weeks ago. I was going to make this piece on Sudan. I had my stories picked out. I had everything ready to go. And it was basically talking about how the forces they're fighting, I think it's the RSF, were coming in and taking blood from, basically exsanguinating the bodies of blood. I was going to talk about the reasons as to why they would possibly be doing that. And when I went back to further my research, the news article was gone. The South
wow.
Sudanese news article that I found talking about the topic was no longer on their website. Couldn't find it
Sudanese or
absolutely
South
anywhere.
Sudanese? Because they're two
South
different
Sudanese.
countries.
I know. I think
Okay.
it was the South Sudanese, and
Oh,
it
a
was just
South Sudan.
completely
Okay.
gone. It was erased from the website, couldn't find anything on it. And so I didn't actually do the story because I didn't have anything to directly link me back to saying, well, this is where I pulled my information from because it's been pulled from the internet.
Ain't that
But
crazy?
like it's like stuff like this, it's like that makes it
Yeah.
hard for someone like me who doesn't have any families there. I don't know anybody that lives in either South or, either of the places. I don't know anybody that actually lives in the Congo. So, coming up and finding resources that I can use to even be able to speak on them has been rather hard, but at the same time, they're still worth noting and they're still worth talking about.
Yeah, that's a very challenging thing too. Like when I look at the whole thing with the vice president on trial in South Sudan, I have to scour and scour and scour to find, is what this group is talking about, and then or agency is talking about. Then I have to corroborate with this and all of that just to make sure the information is factual. I mean, like for instance, there was one adjournment date like last week that two outlets were reporting different things on when the court was going to reconvene, and I had to like hammer that out and flush it out and stuff. But in places like that, like journalism is not a good thing. I mean, they don't look at it as a good thing. Well, the government, at least. I mean, people do, but the government doesn't. I mean, I saw this story of a journalist. I mean, I came across it earlier. It was from 2022. There was a journalist who was arrested at like a market, like kind of like a downtown market in South Sudan because she was covering a protest that was happening. So she got arrested for covering the protest. They ended up letting her go, but that just gives you, the perspective or a better understanding of like what it's like there. Anytime a journalist is reporting on something, for instance, the president, he had kind of pissed himself on TV, like during there was like a state visit. I don't remember what head of state was visiting, but they were outside and the South Sudanese national anthem was playing and the president just started like peeing himself. And the journalists like got that on camera because they were filming everything. And then all those journalists ended up getting arrested for filming that and all of that. They were later let go, but I think they get thrown in prison. They get beat up and banged up pretty well, and then they get let go. But so being on the outside of South Sudan or any of these countries, right, where there's this hostility to journalism, it does two things. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. One, I'm not on the ground. I can't go into a place and see actually what's happening with my own two eyes. Granted, I know people who live in these places, right? I've been to South Sudan. On the flip side, though, I'm able to like report more freely on different things that are happening because I'm outside of the country. If I was in South Sudan reporting on this, might be a different story.
And I get that. We're only privy to the information that we have available at our hands. And sometimes even that information is very few and hard to come by. So I completely understand what you're saying. I think covering topics on South Sudan or just Sudan in general have been really hard because there's very, very few articles. And if they are, they're so heavily propagandized that you can't really get the true sense of what's going on. And so mostly when I make pieces about it, it's been coming from people who live there on the ground, speaking directly to camera or talking about their experiences versus trying to pull a news article from who knows where it's coming from. But also with that, like we have to think like who has their hands in all these countries, right? Because
United
it's
States.
the US, the United States, and Israel have their hands in every single piece of craziness that's going on in the world right now. And it just really goes to show how colonialism works and how we relate to that and how we speak up for people who can't speak for themselves right now, right? But going back to one of the points talking about what's happening across the country with all these riots that are happening in Portland, Chicago, LA. Like we've seen some pretty crazy things that have come out recently. And I just want to share with you this one clip that I found, and then we'll talk about it. He wasn't even doing anything. They were just standing around the outside, and one of the men shot this guy with a rubber bullet, hit him in the head, knocked him over, and then later that same day, he was at one of the protests, and they pretty much like had him on the ground and beating him up. Did you see that?
I did not see that video. That's the video you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's actually two separate videos, but it's the same guy on the same day. He was shot in the head by a rubber bullet. He wasn't seriously injured, but I'm sure his head was ringing with pain. And he was a priest. And so we've had, on top of just him, we've had other priests going just this past weekend. I don't know if you saw it, but there was a whole other group of people, a whole church, a whole Catholic church walked to an ICE facility in Chicago and was trying to provide a service for the people who were being held. And of course, they weren't let through. But you know, when we have this whole big Charlie Kirk thing that just happened and, you know, all of these Christian people coming out and saying all these crazy things.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's pretty hypocritical. I mean, you would think that like with everything that had happened with him, you know, they're talking about turning down the temperature and trying to, you know, really stop political violence or just violence in general. But then you see it perpetuated by ICE at these detention things. I think I think their hate for immigrants and all of that, you know, just kind of outshines the rest of it. And so or eclipses the rest of it. And so I don't know. I've never understood that disconnect. I have never understood that disconnect.
What you think about, you know, all these people who have recently joined up with ICE, right? There's been this whole thing saying that they'll get $50,000 to join and basically come in and, you know, harass, manipulate, and do all these terrible things to regular people living their everyday lives. How do you feel about that?
I feel like it's a pathway for people who have a hatred toward, you know, immigrants and things like that to feel like they can finally do something about it tangibly, right? So like, I don't have to sit here and just rage online, right? Like I get to go out and put on a mask and beat these people up and throw them into vans and, you know, clean the streets of these migrants, you know, I'm guessing they're thinking. And so you have these people who are not trained for this kind of work, right? Or are probably going through some basic crash course, like probably in that South Park episode. I don't know if you've seen it. But I imagine that's pretty much what it's like. You show up, you sign up, you go through a brief orientation because you have these people who are now going. There was a guy who was arrested at a supermarket, just like tackled. And there was this combat veteran who was asking like, are you police? Are you ICE? You need to identify yourself. And they're not saying anything. And these don't look like people who, I feel like you can just tell. I mean, like,
Oh, you could
I don't
definitely
know how.
tell. You could definitely tell that these people have no. These are the rejects who didn't even get allowed to be in the military, let alone, you
Yeah.
know,
So
be able to carry a
I think it's
weapon.
yeah, I think it's extremely dangerous for them to be running around doing this kind of work because they're not trained in de-escalation, right? You get something, you end up having like a tragic incident that's gonna happen. What was it in Chicago? I did a story about it. Maybe not Chicago, but kind of like outside. Somebody was shot during a traffic stop by ICE, because they thought that the person was going to attack them. And so they shot and killed someone. So much has happened since then. But you get into this situation where you have somebody who just got up off their couch and signed up to be an ICE agent, does not really know how to handle de escalation, doesn't have any kind of tactical training. They get thrown into an incident to where they're going in to go arrest this person, and you have the community revolting, trying to protect them. This person instantly gets scared, pulls out their gun, and bow, bow, bow. Like, you never know how far things are going to go, especially if you don't have that training. And that's like another flip side to this too. Like, I'm also against former military signing up to be police officers. I think that is something that hasn't been talked about enough, just because I've had so many interactions with cops and law enforcement and things. And I have always noticed those who are former military are much more aggressive. They're much more dismissive. They're less empathetic because they're coming from a background of, I'm going in because this is a threat and I need to eliminate this threat. So like when you are overseas on a deployment, or you did a tour in Iraq or Afghanistan, right? You're out there with kill orders. You're out there to get the terrorist. And so when you're coming back to the United States, you're looking at the US citizens in that same light, right? And so I don't know how many interactions you've had with police officers, but the next time you do, if you ever do, ask me like, are you former
So this one
military?
thing I don't really talk about very often because of this particular subject, and we are not friends anymore, but I had a very good friend for quite a few years. We were friends before she became a police officer. And then even after she was a police officer, we stayed friends for a little while. And I haven't spoken to her for probably a good 2 years now because we are on opposite ends of the playing field, right? Like I can't stay friends with someone who is doing all of the things that I am speaking against, right? Morally, that feels very bankrupt for me to say, oh, but she's my friend. Is she my friend? Is she my friend? I can't wrap that in my head and say, oh, I can be friends with someone who actively does all of the things that I am very much against. So that's
Such as like anecdotally.
the police lately have such a bad rap, especially here in town, especially with Black minorities, everything that's happening. And she's at the opposite end of that. I think that she's very privileged. She's very white and doesn't know what it's like to struggle as any type of immigrant or just being Black in general. And I don't think that that plays well for someone who comes in with like, she wasn't military, but to say, oh, because my ex whatever was military, I'm, all for whatever the American people want. And it's like, if that's the case, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. But that's just my
Yeah.
particular stance with that.
Yeah, that can get kind of tricky. I mean, like, there's a difference between, like, you know what, like, I'm white, right? I know I have this privilege. I can try to go into this role and try to make a difference from the inside out, right? Like, that's one way. But if you're going in to perpetuate the system and not change it, that's a different
Yeah,
conversation. Yeah.
I agree.
Can I
Yeah,
ask
sure.
you what do you think about this ceasefire deal and hostage
So I
release?
actually just got done with another podcast before we started. I film with a friend every single day, not every day, but I film with her pretty often. And I am not optimistic when it comes to this ceasefire. And it's just because of out of all the ceasefires that we've had in the past, something always breaks, something always happens. And it's very hard to think of Israel as honest when they're not. And when they say they're going to do something and they actually do it, but then they don't really do it. So like just within the past 2 days, there's been a whole bunch of things that have happened. They've violated the ceasefire multiple times. They are not allowing as many aid trucks in a day as they say they were going to allow in. Like so many things that they say that they're going to do, they never actually do. And to say I have hopes in a ceasefire, I really do hope and I pray that it continues the way that it stays at a ceasefire. But given what I know about Israel and everything that's happened so far, I don't see it staying for much longer. And if it does stay, a lot of things are going to happen. Like they just released a bunch of people today that were being held. They released over 2,000 people today or yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to watch, You see people come back home. Some of them are reunited with their families. Other of them have lost their entire families while they were being detained. And these are everyday people who've done nothing wrong. All they did was exist. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking to see that happen. And then to be able to come up with a clear, saying, Israel's doing all these things that they said they're going to do. They're not doing any of them. They're not doing any of the things that they agreed to, and they're already trying to break the ceasefire. So do I see it staying? No. And they're still not allowing anybody to leave Gaza, even though they're saying that Gaza is going to be completely empty. Well, how is that going to happen? There's only two ways that could happen. One, they make everybody leave, or two, they kill everybody. And they haven't stopped killing. They're still killing people on the Strip, even though it's considered a ceasefire. So no, I don't have much hope in Israel keeping to their word. I pray and I hope that they do, but honestly, I don't see it happening.
What did you think of the kind of the pro-Palestinian movement during the election cycle and how they came out?
So I was very involved.
I wasn't familiar.
I was actually very involved.
Really?
So I wasn't directly, but I had friends who worked on Jill Stein's, they were like in the background doing work for her, making videos and stuff like that.
Her campaign.
Yes, that was the word I was looking for. They worked on her campaign with her, and I had several friends who were in that part. I did vote for Jill Stein. And it wasn't so much that I thought that she would win, because I'm a realist, but the idea was to just get another party that would be able to vote continuously after the election. And it didn't happen. So that's okay. But I've been very involved with the whole Palestine movement since pretty much it started. After October, I think I officially got involved, and I started raising money for families in January or February of 2024. And I've been pretty heavily involved with it since. I do have monthly fundraisers that I do every single month, where I have concerts and I have families come on if they're able, or a lot of the times I'll just pick families that I know can't actually be online, and then we'll donate money to those families as well. But everything that I've done since then has just been to help Palestinians, regular everyday people just trying to live their life, not get killed. And it's really hard when you sit down and you form relationships with people on the ground. It's not like I just picked a random family and said, oh, I'm going to send you some money. No, these are people that I've actually spent a lot of time with, that I've actually gotten to know, who I'd call my family if anything ever happened. And it's really, really hard to see them struggle so much. I think there's this one family that I help all the time, and she's actually one of the very first families that I ever met. And she has a little boy. And to see, he's only 5 now, but at the time he was 3 when all this got started. And to see how slowly his body has changed for worse has been really hard, because he's so small. And you see him in every picture, he's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And as a mother, I can't tell you what that does. To watch a child starve to death, nothing worse, nothing worse.
So would you say you were actively trying to get people not to vote for Kamala Harris?
No, that was never my purpose. My purpose, when I say, that's what kind of got me involved in the whole more political discussions online, was never to sway anyone's opinion for voting for Kamala Harris. You're going to vote for who you want to vote for regardless. I personally could not vote for her because of her stance on Gaza. That's the reason why I couldn't vote for Kamala Harris. And that's all it has to do with.
Because when I hear her talk about it back throughout the campaign and things like that, she talked about everything that Trump is talking about, but she talked about a 2-state solution. Trump never talked about that. And I think from my perspective and observation, that's the ultimate goal, right? For Palestinian statehoods, for them to be safe and secure and, live their lives without.
But here's my thing with that, right? You can talk all you want to talk, but if you're not doing anything about it, that's a completely different story. And she would say, oh, I want to do this, this, and this. But when it came to sending Israel weapons, she just signed it over. She didn't give a crap. And her husband.
He didn't sign it over because she was the vice president.
Right. I understand that. Yeah. But when she was running for office, she made it very clear that none of her policies would be any different than Biden's. She made that very clear. She was not going to sway any of her opinions from what Biden said and what Biden did. And even her husband is very connected to the whole Zionist movement that is going on over there. Did you know that?
Well, yes. But then when I also look at it too, Trump also talked about making Gaza a beachfront resort.
Right. So that's the whole point, right? When both parties are talking about doing things in Gaza that are not conducive that would not be helpful, why would I vote for either one of them? If you're not going to do anything that's helping the situation better, why would I vote for you? And she never gave me any reason to change my mind.
Well, I will tell you, this ceasefire agreement and everything, like I remember this and I saw a video reminding me of it today. That ceasefire that Biden was trying to get negotiated, those 3 phases, this is the exact same ceasefire deal.
But it didn't happen.
Like it's the same thing.
But it didn't happen.
It didn't happen because Netanyahu didn't want it to happen.
And I'm not arguing with that point with you. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying it didn't happen.
I guess, but what I'm saying is I think with or without Trump, like I think this was going to happen eventually, whether it had been Trump, whether it had been Kamala Harris. However, like I just look at it too from what I see, from what I have seen, right? Like, especially in Michigan, people were like actively trying. That's why I asked you that question. People were actively trying to sway votes. Don't vote for Kamala Harris. Don't do this. You saw a lot of creators like Maya Ayuni and like these really popular creators online actively working against Kamala Harris, knowing that Trump was going to come down with all this authoritarian stuff, right? Project 2025. We talked about immigration. We talked about ICE,
so
dropping
you're
Black Hawk
basically saying that because she was a little bit better, I should have voted for her.
I'm not saying that you should have voted for her, but what I'm just saying, like, I think too was actively, which you said you were not, but I mean, like, just the people who are on, like, within that movement who are actively working against her.
I think what it boils down to, I think the biggest point that I can tell you what it boils down to for me and for a lot of other people that I know is both of them were not doing anything to support or to help the Palestinian people as a whole, regardless if it's two-state solution, whatever it is, they were not helping the situation. Both of them have made it very clearly known, all 3 of them, I should say, Biden, Kamala, Trump, all 3 of them have made it known that they are for Israel and they do not care so much about what the Palestinians need, anything like that. So for me, especially, I can only speak for myself, but I think for a lot of other people too, is I cannot look at either one of these 2 candidates and say, oh, I'm going to vote for you, even though you're shipping all of these weapons to go and murder a bunch of other people. That's what it came down to for me. And that's why I did not vote for either one of them. And I stand by that.
So what do you think about like people in Michigan, the Committed movement in Michigan saying that like, oh, we're going to vote for Trump to give Gaza a second chance?
I think that's ridiculous too. That's absolutely ridiculous. There's so much stuff that people say that I think are just like, you're losing your freaking minds. But when it all boils down to it, you have to think about what policies, what's important to you as a voter, and go with that. And that's what I did.
So everything happening in Gaza was like the #1 issue for you this election?
It was a very large piece of the election cycle, yes, for me.
I'm just curious because I think about like what we've ended up with and, Trump and the policies and everything that's going on and just like how he's like destroying America.
I agree. But I think that if this is just my opinion, even if he wasn't elected, someone like him would have been elected eventually, right? Like it's going to happen.
That's kind of like an accelerationist mindset though. Like
no, it's not.
Almost like
it's
let's just get it over with now.
It's called reality.
I don't know. I just look at all of this and I hear people's different perspectives on why they voted how they did and what they support, what they stand for, what they don't, etc. And I just think about like how people like didn't take Trump seriously, right? Like when people would talk about
I took him very
2025,
seriously. I took him very seriously with what he said. I have never not taken Trump seriously with what he said because no matter all the craziness that comes out of his mouth, he's a demon. And I believe every evil thing that comes out of his mouth. And I should clarify that. I don't believe everything that comes out of his mouth. But what I'm saying is when he says the most awful crap that you've ever heard, believe him because that's truly how he feels. So no, what I'm basically saying is I could not vote for either one of them because of their stance on those particular topics, especially when it comes around Palestine. So that's why I did not vote for either one of them too. I did vote. I just did not vote for either one of them.
And you knew the possibility of like what we have now would come. Like I'm guessing like you weighed that like
I did not automatically think that Trump was going to win. But
what I'm saying is like knowing that like, hey, I'm going to vote for third party, knowing that this third party candidate is not going to win. There is the possibility that we will end up with.
Before we even get down that road, just because I voted for third party, the turnout votes for third party was so low that it did not make a difference. Even if she had gotten all the third party votes, it still would not have got her over the number where she needed to win to beat Trump. So I don't like the fact when someone comes in and says, oh, even though you knew you voted for third party didn't get enough votes as a whole to even make a dent in Trump's numbers. So that's where I'm going to end that part of the conversation. Like it didn't even make a dent.
I'm asking you because I've never talked to you before.
Of the population that voted third party, less than 2%. The goal was at least to get her to 5% so that way she could be on the, or not she could be, but before the Green Party could be on the ticket going forward. We didn't even come close to that number. It was less than 2%. So when people want to sit there and say, oh, I'm going to blame the whole third party movement, you can't do that. Because if you look at the numbers,
I didn't blame you. I
numbers,
didn't blame you. But because like with the people voting third party, there was two parts of that, right? There were people actively voting or actively telling people to make Kamala Harris lose.
and I did not do that.
Right.
That was not something that I ever did. So I told people that I was voting for Jill Stein and why I voted for Jill Stein, but I never told anyone who to vote for. I don't believe in that. You can't tell somebody what to do.
So let me ask you this question then. So like Harris obviously lost, right? She's doing her book tour and things like that. But you still see people like showing up to her rally, still protesting her. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
But I haven't actually seen that, so I don't.
You haven't seen that?
I guess I haven't really looked either, but that's not something that I would tend to follow. It's not important, right? Like she's not doing anything that's important as of right now, so no.
Speaking, just kind of like looking forward with Trump's America and things like that, you know, I think to circle back to conversation on what's currently happening in Nebraska, I feel like we're all frogs in boiling water. I feel like everybody knows that the temperature is rising, right? My friend said it in the funniest way. He's like, we're all frogs in boiling water, except we all have a thermometer, right? That tells us the temperature is rising. And I think everybody is just waiting for someone to do something, right? Like, I feel like we all are in that like bystander mentality where you're just like waiting for somebody else to do something. So everybody's just paralyzed. You know, I don't know. I think when Trump is done with his term, whether or not the midterms will be fair, I made a video that went up a little bit ago about how North Carolina is now joining the redistricting arms race, and how fair the maps in 2026 are going to be. And moving forward, I mean, if the Democrats do return to power, what are the Democrats actually going to do to actually check and balance what is currently happening?
That's a whole other topic, right?
Yeah.
And that's a whole other topic that we could discuss at another time. But that is a wild part of the piece as well, because there's so many different things happening that with Trump's like his executive orders and everything that he's citing into law, and even the Supreme Court and what they're doing makes it really difficult to think like it's going to take years worth of recovery. Even if he dies tomorrow, which Trump died tomorrow, but even if he died tomorrow, it's still going to take years to undo all of the things that he has already done, right? So, you know, it's fun for us. Fun for us for tomorrow, another day. So, Jazari, thank you so much for joining me today. I know this was really heavy, but I'm so glad that you were able to come on and have a conversation with me.
Sure.
To everyone that's listening, if this landed with you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and follow us for more. I will have all of our links down in the description below. And then also down in the comments, let me know, what do you think is next for Nebraska specifically? And what national policy do you think deserves the most attention? Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had a good time, and I will catch you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.